serve your customers, be very specific, and most importantly, this is the most important part. I'm sure you've got plenty. You must be bloody consistent. You have to be consistent.
Buckle up. We are going all the way to New Zealand to sit down with Sinjin, and I love the way he put it. He's got 20 years training teams to close high ticket, high resistance buyers in the toughest market imaginable, agriculture. So there's going to be a lot of lessons that overlap, taking objections, getting through, and things no one wants to talk about, right? But with that, Sinjin, thank you for joining me technically a day ahead as we
Yes,
record.
Vincent. That's right. I'm closer to my weekend.
Saw using neuroscience to win over the toughest clients. We call it the buyer's brain, unlocking the psychology behind purchasing decisions, right? These are things we all do and know. We're going to get to the nitty gritty. One more I'll share is why serving beats selling every time. You hear that a lot, but we're going to actually dive into it. And today we're brought to you by ComingAlivePodcastProduction.com. And now, Sinjin, we're going to go back a year or two, right? Way back to when you were figuring out the job market, right? You were thinking, what am I going to do? How the heck did you end up as an entrepreneur?
Well, it's a long journey, but the short version is my parents are farmers in the UK, in England, and I've done ad agency, I've done marketing, corporate roles, and I just came full circle back to my rural roots, my farming family roots. And I decided that instead of making other people money, I should make myself money. So I left a job that was paying me about close to $250,000. I was in a provincial town. I was on high commission. I was a strategic planning business development guy for a rural marketing agency, and they set me up really well. And I had three kids, very large mortgage, and I bailed. And my wife was very supportive of that. And looking back, I should have done it a lot earlier and in terms of backing myself. So I saw a real niche in terms of, you call it niche, I call it niche with my sort of mongrel Aussie Kiwi accent here, being English by birth. And I saw a niche with rural and sales and psychology. I've always been fascinated in human behavior. I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm not a clinical psychologist, but my stuff I believe works in the real world, not the academic lectern lecture world. So we can dive into that. That's how I got there and took a big leap, took a bet on myself. Probably a couple of times, probably thought, what the hell am I doing? Like all entrepreneurs do, and go, oh my God, I've got no money to pay the mortgage this month, and my wife doesn't even know that. I don't know if we can afford the groceries, the shopping. I've had that twice, maybe three times, and every time you come out of that, I'll make it really clear to your listeners, if you're on that journey, you will be able to get through that, but you have to be able to push through and really, really do the work, and you will get through.
Oh, wow. That was so well said. And it's going to be a lot of work. Again and again, you're going to take a lot of rejection. But as long as you're getting started in this industry of small businesses, are you doing what you're passionate about? Something that you can add value to other people and fill a need. Because if not, chances are it's not going to be the best for the entrepreneurial space. But you mentioned something interesting there. You stayed around too long. You didn't actually
Yeah.
jump into entrepreneurship when you thought you should have.
Mm,
So let's talk about that mindset shift where if there's any entrepreneurs tuning in who are,
yeah.
one foot in, one foot out, they're not
Yeah.
committing.
Great
You
question.
waited too
Great question.
long. You often hear people going too quick. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that.
Mm. Yeah, I love how you picked that up. So the metaphor I use is I was on a skyscraper and I needed to jump to a one-story building and I didn't want to kill myself in the process. So what I would say is to people and listeners that are sort of maybe want to be entrepreneurs, set up their own businesses, that you do have a lot of time outside your job to start that second job. I wouldn't just jump. What I would do is, I think you have 168 hours a week. And after you've done exercise and you've done work and you've done sleep, you still got about 68 hours, which is 37% of your working week. That's the rough numbers.
Yeah.
And in that 37%, you could be committing to your craft. So I want to make it really clear, and I knew, Vincent, you'd enjoy this. You must commit to your craft. You must commit to your effing craft. And you have to be willing to do the work. You'll have to work harder in your own business than you've worked for anyone else before. But the good news is you will get all the rewards. Your family will get all the rewards. So I would start working on something. There are all these people come on and say, follow your passion, everything else. Find something you are fascinated about, something that you're very curious about, and it won't feel like work. So for me, it was psychology and human behavior. You know, the first book I read was Robert Cialdini's book Influence, which is a seminal book. Then I started reading Dan Pink books. Then I was into Robert Greene and Adam Grant, and I just snowballed from there and there and there. And the more I learned about human behavior and psychology, and then was able, the key thing is here to get much into the listeners as we can, you've got to combine rare and valuable skills. Otherwise, you're a commodity. I always say that you should be the specialist, not the generalist. You should be the cardiologist, not the GP. Because a GP is a general practitioner and they know a lot about a lot of things, but they don't know a lot about one thing. So when you have a serious medical issue or challenge with loved ones or family, you go to the specialist. You need to be the specialist. I cannot emphasize that point enough that specificity, hopefully you're like this, Vincent, specificity spits cash. Okay, so you have to be very, very specific, very specialist. I would also say when it comes to selling, so I'm going to keep dropping these things and we can unpack them. When you are selling, you find your craft, you need to diagnose like a doctor, which we all heard before in all the sales books and the Tom Hopkins and the Zig Ziglars and amazing offers like that. I would add to it that you need to sell like a surgeon. And a surgeon sells with conviction and confidence because of their specialism. So find a niche, find something that you've got an insider advantage in, something that you are really passionate about, the nuances, you can talk about it, you can articulate it, you can enter the conversation that your customer's having in their or her head and go for it and back yourself. But you've got to be willing to do the work. I think it's never been easier to be an entrepreneur, but I think it's also never been harder because there's so much out there. There's so many tools, there's so much there's so much slop, there's so much noise. In order to cut through, I believe you need to be a specialist, not a generalist.
No, you're certainly right about everything, but all the noise out right now in entrepreneurs, a lot of ADD, right? You want to finish all these tasks, go, go, go. But as you were saying this, typed up an email here, you're talking about sales, and my friend here goes that niche word, right? Niche is niche. Niche down and then niche down again, right? Shane, he's on my advisory board. And even this show, that entrepreneur show, we could do that entrepreneur show for finance professionals or accounting professionals, right? Or going deeping for first year accounting professionals, right? So you can always dig down and get more successful with it. So that was a heck of a point there, but I've got your information sheet point up here. And as I said, a lot of it fascinated me here. And everyone, if you're enjoying today's show, be sure to subscribe to stay current with all of these amazing entrepreneurs. And now you also talk about how to build trust, right? That's something you add a lot of value to people. Can we talk a little bit about how to build trust and then, of course, reduce the risk in sales?
Beautiful. When it comes to sales, I'll be really succinct. The problem with sales is selling. Stop selling. You need to stop selling. You need to start serving. The way you serve is by serving their best interest through the
Yeah.
quality of your questions. All sales are made in the conversation, not in the demonstration, not in the quotation, not in the estimation. It's in the conversation. So you need to craft your ability to take command and control of a conversation in a non-controlling, non-commanding way that doesn't sound or feel like a yucky, sleazy sales conversation. That's key. So I said again, the sale is made in the conversation. And the other thing is you need to sell non-assumptively. So in order to get trust, and we hear the kind of cliches, which are true, that people only buy from people that they know, like, and trust. Before they know, like, and trust you, and we'll talk about positioning and pre-sale positioning in a minute, they need to feel safe with you. Now, you don't need to be a psychologist to know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The second most important thing after your basic physiological needs is safety. Most people never feel safe with a salesperson. So you appeal to the wrong part of the brain. And when you appeal to the wrong part of the brain, they shut down, they shut shop on you, and you will not have a conversation. It'll be short, it'll be superficial and shallow. So we want deep, rich, meaningful. And in order to get to that part of the brain where they feel safe, we need to be non-assumptive and we need to serve instead of sell. And then this is really, really important. I suggest everyone writes this down. If you're driving, obviously don't do it. I want you to stop being a sales rep. I want you to be a buyer's assistant. I want you to be a buyer's assistant. So what I mean by that is if you are a sales rep, what you're doing is you're appealing to the wrong part of the brain. And what I mean by that, and if by the power of technology here, I'm just going to show you something. If you're watching this on video, this is the brain in a very simple format. You have a back of the brain, the middle of the brain, and the top of the brain. This is really, really simple. We'll keep it really clean. The back of the brain or the amygdala is the reptilian brain because a reptile only has one brain, and that's job is to keep it alive, to survive. So what happens if you're a sales rep and you're show up, throw up, feature creature, more interested in yourself than you are in the prospect.
Yeah.
I always say be more interested in the person in front of you than the product or service you sell. If you come in there and you just all guns firing, close, 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 and all that kind of bullshit, you're going to lock them in the back of their brain. Now, if you're a buyer's assistant, you can get from the back of the brain to the middle of their brain, which is their feel brain. So from the fear at the back to the feel in the middle. We know from neuroscience that people, obviously, we know this already. People buy emotionally, then justify rationally. It's why we buy brands. And then when you've been a buyer's assistant and you have looked after them, then you become a trusted advisor. But no one gets married on the first date, and a trusted advisor, they then hold you top of mind because you are in the prefrontal cortex of their brain. So I just wanted to share that with the listeners and the viewers. This is a very important piece to understand. And the other thing is, what I want to say here is your job is never to sell anything to anyone.
Mhm.
Okay? Your job is not to sell anything to anyone. It is to help your buyers, whoever they might be, make the most accurate, informed, and best decisions for them and their business, or in my case, their farm, their system. So when you do that, you take away all the yuckiness, all the fear, all the back of brain response, and they go, this person's just trying to help me make the best decision. Because you know what sales is about? Sales are about decisions. Sales are about buying. Buying is about purchasing, and purchasing is about decision making. So if you don't understand human biases and heuristics, you must be an effing student of psychology. You have to understand psychology, how the brain bank, and you can then become a mind reader, and you
Mhm.
don't need a PhD to do it. You can just see how you navigate that conversation. So I think it's really important the listeners understand this.
You just gave so much value there, and now I'm going to lean into something else, right? So, say we have a cynic, right? We're trying to sell to, as you describe, a cynic. How do we win over the cynic in minutes? And then why most salespeople fail?
So winning over a cynic is you've got to understand, you've got to meet them where they're at in their brain. So the fact is, what you do is you use a pattern interrupt. So what you do is if I'm turning up to someone, and I obviously deal in farming, and farming are really tough because everyone tries to sell to them, they buy a lot of stuff. And the stakes are so high for farmers because they have to live with that decision. It's not like they're turning over every 18 months. The decisions they make, they have to live with and walk out their front door every day because where they live, they work. There's no separation. So you don't have the numbers game with farmers, and number of farms are decreasing, right? So, you've got to really look after your farmers. So the cynic is all about what you do is you do a pattern interrupt, and what you do is you disarm them. And what you do is I'd say, Vincent, before I start talking about how amazing we are and how great our product service and all the bells and whistles, because I'm sure lots of people have told you that before,
Yeah,
tell me why are you potentially even looking at something like this now? What's the problem you're trying to solve?
like that.
So you see what I just do there? What I've done is I've met you in your mind, which is the back of your brain, and then I've moved forward to service to go with those two questions. Why are you potentially even looking at this now? I used a very important word there, potentially,
Hmm.
because it's a sign, a safe signal, non-assumption. And then I said, and so what's the specific problem you're trying to solve? Now, I don't have to time to go into all the neurology there, but one was the middle of the brain and one was the top of the brain question. If you can spot the two, you're going to be fine. Why you're potentially even looking at something like this now is a buyer assistant question. And then what's the problem you're trying to solve is a trusted advisor top of brain question. But
Hmm.
you see what I did before? The first question was a disarming question that appealed to the back of the brain. So I moved from the back to the middle and then to the front in literally 15 seconds.
The value is endless today. It's such a great time that we're having you on this show here. And everyone, I hope you're really diving into what he's saying. Be sure to stick around just a little longer to the end of the episode. We'll get you his contact info so you can see all his great content online because his clients have included global leaders like John Deere, World Sales Mastery. What are some tips you can provide to our audience here who want to acquire this world-class clientele, right? The top of the game. You've done it. What are some tips you can give?
I think you have to become so good they can't ignore you. And I think you also have to give a lot before you get. I send a weekly email out. It doesn't have Starburst and MailChimp, it's just a text email. And it goes out religiously every Tuesday morning to a list. And what I do is I serve and I serve and I serve and I serve and I serve. Some of my sales cycles will take 7 years. Some of our biggest deals, and they're big deals because we work with Bayer, John Deere, Corteva, Delaval, lots of big brands all over the world, UK, Canada, America. And we're growing in North America. And I get someone from North Dakota with like 200 dealerships and then 40 in Europe and 20 in Australia go, hey, I've been getting your emails for the last 2 years. And the thing is, I haven't spoken to them, or they've listened to my podcast, like your beautiful podcast, or they've read one of my books. I've written a book by Ryan Halliday, The Daily Stoic, but I wrote it for rural salespeople. So what you
Ooh.
do is you have to give and be of service and be patient. You can be patient if you are basically giving enough. If you feel you haven't got enough to give, you haven't got enough to give away. All right. So
Mm.
an artist always creates. So I want you not to consume. I want you to create, and I want you to send out as much as you can and show them how damn good you are. Now, the point going back to our earlier bit for the listeners is the more specific you are, the more you can repel the wrong customers and attract the right customers. That's your job. Because what you do is you have a magnetic quality to your messaging and marketing
Hmm.
where they go, you understand exactly what I'm thinking right now. So what happens is I get a rural sales manager who's selling feed or fertilizer in Wisconsin or Nebraska or wherever it happens to be, or Alberta, Manitoba, and they go, man, we just read your email and I just passed around the office. Were you in our sales meeting yesterday? And I go, no, I wasn't, because we've just been talking about CRM and how we just cannot get our guys to do data hygiene on CRM. The thing is, your content, I know we're throwing a lot of your listeners here, your content comes from your conversations. So what happens is the more conversations you have, the more those insights inform your strategy and the more you are then on point with your messages, because marketing, it's a noisy ocean, it's drowning, it's so
Yeah.
noisy, and you have to be more specific. One thing I can say is serve your customers, be very specific, and most importantly, this is the most important part, I'm sure you've got plenty, you must be bloody consistent. You have to be consistent. Now, I send out, you're consistent, Vincent, with the wonderful work that you do. I'm consistent with my emails. I'm consistent with my podcasts and my guests. I'm consistent with my content, my socials. Consistency is going to beat intensity every time. They need to know that you're predictable and reliable, and the brain craves certainty and predictability.
Yep.
Again, a lot of neuroscience for that. If you keep turning up and you're consistent and your messages of quality because they're specific and you've done your research, done your homework, you will succeed, but you have to be consistent.
You made this episode a joy to host. I mean, even on the information sheet, as I keep reading it as we go, trying to interject, you've just been giving so much value. Everyone, we talked about a lot, and he definitely gave you some tips and mindset shifts, you could say, as you go into the sales process. But before we get his contact info, my friend, Sinjin, if you could pick one entrepreneur, dead or alive, to sit down with and speak with, who are you picking? And did I get your name right there?
Yeah, of course you
All
did,
right,
man.
all right.
Without hesitation, it'd be Jim Rohn.
With that,
Jim
all
Rohn.
right, let's hear why.
I have a personal board, and most of them aren't alive. Most of them are dead, and I read them and watch them and consume their content. Benjamin Franklin, Jim Rohn, Dan Pink. Some of these guys are alive, some of them are not. And ultimately, what I like about Jim Rohn, there's a lot around mindset. He was a man ahead of his time. And I often quote him. I often copy him on my socials in terms of sharing some of his messages with my following. The guy was so clear and articulate about what you got to be a success. All the things that I'm talking, everything I've learned from guys like that. I synthesize my learning. These bookshelves behind me, and there's more around me in my office here. Readers are leaders, okay? And Warren Buffett is another guy, and obviously he's very
I know
obviously
that
the
one. Yeah.
Omaha Oracle. You know him, everyone knows him, right? But he says the more you learn, the more you earn, and I cannot tell you the impact that one sentence had on me. And what I've done is I've developed curiosity, I've committed to my craft, and I've probably 10x, 20x, 50x my income as a result. The more you learn, the more you must. I'm a big reader. Maybe you want to listen to great podcasts like this. You need to be an absolute learning machine. And then you need to apply quickly and consistently. It's not enough to attain knowledge. You need to apply the knowledge because knowledge not used is useless.
Oh my gosh, you have certainly given us the behind the scenes to how you got to where you are. So I can't thank you enough, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's listen and remember to subscribe so you don't miss great guests like this. But first, before I let you go, what's your website? Where can we say hi to you online? Everything you.
A lot of people, maybe a few people, this has been useful for. Just because I train the rural sales sector in agriculture, don't dismiss the psychology because whatever sector you sell in, the psychology is the same. Okay. So the best thing to do, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, which Vincent's wonderful team will put in the show notes, or you can go to ruralsalessuccess.com. That's all one word, ruralsalessuccess.com. There's a whole bunch of goodies there. There's books, there's podcasts, there's emails. There's a treasure trove on psychology and sales. But even hopefully the little things that you've heard here, we delve much deeper on them in those
Right.
resources.
Well, thank you for sharing that, everyone. I don't know what you're waiting for. Go ahead and check out his content. Stay up to date with all of the things he's doing because he's growing and growing and growing. My name is Vincent A. Lanci, and I want to thank you for keeping this show a top 2.5% global show from Listen Notes. And remember to subscribe again to stay current. Leave a comment, share with a friend who you think would find value in this show. And for that, we're signing off all the way from New Zealand to here in Florida. Thank you so much, Sinjin.
You're welcome. A pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. I would love to hear your feedback. What did you love? What do you want to see more of? Are there any questions you would like me to ask the guests who come on the show? This show is not possible without you, the amazing listeners, so please email us at podcastsbylanci@gmail.com and let us know what you think. We'll also feature you on a later show. Please remember to subscribe to stay current with our amazing community of guests who will continue to come on the show, sprinkled in with solo episodes from me, Vincent A. Lanci. With that, I look forward to introducing more shows to you each and every week. And with that, we're signing off today. Enjoy the episodes and make it a great day ahead.